Novak Djokovic has had his visa cancelled once again. His legal team have been informed of that. Alex Hawke, who is the Immigration Minister for Australia, announced it at around 10 to 7 this morning, Irish time, and then Djokovic's legal team have been given the decision in writing. Just to give you a reminder of this statement, Alex Hawke said, "Today I exercise my power under Section 133C3 of the Migration Act to cancel the visa held by Mr Novak Djokovic on health and good order grounds on the basis that it was in the public interest to do so." This decision followed orders by the Federal Circuit Court and Family Court on 10th of January 22, quashing a prior cancellation decision on procedural fairness grounds. In making this decision, I carefully considered information provided to me by the Department of Home Affairs, the Australian Border Force and Mr Djokovic. And the Morrison government is firmly committed to protecting Australia's borders, particularly in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic. He finishes by saying, "I thank the officers of the Department of Home Affairs and the Australian Border Force who work every day to serve Australia's interests in increasingly challenging operational environments." And we can go live to Australia now this morning. Delighted to say Professor Jack Anderson is back with us. Good evening to you, Jack. How are you keeping?
Yeah, all good. Yeah.
This wasn't such a surprise, was it, from your point of view?
No, it wasn't a surprise. Yesterday, the Prime Minister gave a press conference on a general COVID issues, but he did make kind of oblique mention of the Djokovic scenario, and he did say that he reiterated the point about players having to have, or people having to have vaccinations entering into Australia, and he also mentioned the point about just because you have a visa, that just gives you an eligibility to enter the country. It doesn't guarantee you entering into the country. So we had a fair idea where it's going, and there was a bit of drama about it today. It was delayed until the last minute, really 10 to 6 in the evening here, just in time for the main news headlines and the TV, just per chance on that. And now we don't really know what's going to happen now. Our initial thoughts were that Djokovic would go back into detention. We're not quite sure about that. I think the latest is that he's been asked to attend an interview tomorrow, but his lawyers have said that they will seek to challenge this in the courts, and that's going to be interesting, very, very interesting. Their first thing will be to try and keep him in the country. Their second thing will be to try and get him to play on Monday. And then the third thing, obviously, will be to override the minister's decision, which will be very, very, very difficult for them to do so, given that it's a discretion issue and a judicial review type. So look, it's ongoing at the minute. The mood, though, has very much hardened in Melbourne and Australia against Djokovic. And there is no doubt that the politicians involved were acutely aware of that, very much hardened against Djokovic.
Can you explain to us, Jack, why the overturning of the visa cancellation earlier in the week has once again been overturned, or how that's possible?
Yeah, so what happened is Djokovic gets the medical exemption to come in. He gets a visa to come in, and all seems in order, to be honest. As far back as November and into December, he arrives in early January, and suddenly the border force says, no, actually, we don't think that medical exemption is what's required. Your visa is cancelled. And then we have the drama of the first court case. Now, looking back on the first court case, he succeeds in getting the visa cancellation overturned, and he gets his visa back. But looking back on it, I'm not saying that the judge was quite generous, but it was a very narrow procedural ground on which to succeed. His lawyers did a very, very good job, and the government lawyers weren't very good, to be honest. They seemed to be rushed on that. So he gets back his visa, and off we go. But under migration law, the immigration minister here in Australia has a personal power to revoke a visa or to uphold or to grant a visa. It can go either way. And that's what the immigration minister decided here. It's a personal power. And it was an interesting process because the immigration minister took his time during the week. I think they were taking the political temperature as well. But they consulted with the Border Force, they consulted with the Department of Health, and they consulted and allowed Djokovic's legal team to make submissions. And then they decided whether or not the minister could, in the public interest, public health grounds, either allow him to stay on the visa or cancel the visa. So that's where we go. And Australian immigration law allows that. But what was interesting during the week is it was kind of like a drip against Djokovic, or at least against the case he was trying to make. So it ends up that there are now, we think, 3 jurisdictions where there are questions about his behaviour. Serbia, after a positive test. How did he get into Spain, not being vaccinated for training purposes? And how did he get into Australia? So that came out. It came out about the actual, one of the travel declaration forms. He said he hadn't travelled anywhere 14 days previous to arriving in Australia. It turns out he had, from what we gather. And then there was the kind of general issues around this L'Equipe interview, which you may have, when he was positive and he was photographed unmasked. So those kind of all issues built up. The political issues built up as well. And you've got to realise here in Melbourne and in Australia, Omicron is getting to its peak. Melbourne has the same population as the Republic of Ireland. We had 35,000 cases today. Hospitalisation rates are getting serious. And there are issues about whether for the 3rd year in a row the schools will reopen. So you've got all that context. And actually the Prime Minister has just given a press release which put all those things in together. You know, ultimately, there was a very, very strong political element to it. But we are where we are now. The interesting thing where we are now is that Djokovic's visa has been cancelled. So he's illegal in Australia at the minute. And technically under the Act, that means that he could be deported and that he would be banned from re-entering the country for 3 years. Which is going to be interesting. But there's going to be talk now. There's going to be negotiations. Djokovic will probably contest this. He will probably go for it. It's going to be difficult. But I wonder whether the lawyers are saying to him now, and it was interesting, Martina Navratilova said this today as well, that you just go, enough. We've all made our point here, whatever that point that is, and that he leaves voluntarily. So there's an option there as well. But it's going to be an interesting few hours. I think the main winners will be Djokovic's rivals, Nadal included. The main loser will be Tennis Australia. And I think a lot of this goes back to what happened in November about the medical exemption.
And Jack, just when you mentioned the appeal route there, do you think he may contest this? What would that be like exactly? How long does that take? Does he stay there? What happens? Does he go back home, or what is that appeal like? Yeah, so I think he'll push very strongly for something to happen this weekend, because effectively he's playing Monday against a fellow Serb. Ironically, he got a very, very good draw. He actually got a really, really good draw. But he has to play Monday, so things have to be in some way progressed Monday, but it's going to be really difficult for him legally. The minister took his time, was very deliberate, consulted widely, and even consulted with and allowed submissions from Djokovic. It ultimately comes down to the minister's discretion, unless there's something totally unreasonable or irrational, to use that legal phrase, about what's been done here. It's very difficult for Djokovic. Now, having said that, you know, he has a very, very good legal team in Hall Wilcox, top sports lawyers here in Melbourne. They're very good. Yeah, everyone says, you know, justice is blind. We treat everyone the same, but justice may be blind, but it listens occasionally to money, and there will be a lot of resources as we speak going into this.
Especially when it comes to the pace of it, or getting it before a judge this weekend. Like just reading up on it, Jack. But so this case will go back to the Federal Circuit Court. Is that right? And Anthony Kelly, who was the judge who overturned it in the first place, So it would be the same thing.
It'll go back to the federal. Sorry, it'll go back to the Federal Circuit Court. I'm not sure Anthony Kelly will take it. Right. They have a judge on standby for this. They knew this was coming, so they have a judge on standby for this and to hear this. If it comes to that, it may still not come to that. It may be the case that Djokovic goes voluntarily, and as part of that, the 3-year ban is waived. So therefore, he would be allowed to come back next year. And maybe something like that happens. We're not quite sure yet. But either way, whatever judge it is, it's going to be very, very difficult for them because they are very narrow grounds in terms of the Migration Act itself.
Djokovic posting on Instagram the other day referring to the administrative mistake made by his agent, the error of judgment on his part by not isolating. Was that a mistake in your opinion?
Yeah, so in some ways, so what happened there was on the border declaration form, anyone coming into Australia has that mad panic, 2 hours before you come in to fill out these forms. But, he said, no, I hadn't travelled anywhere in 14 days previous. He actually had. So the yes, no, he got the wrong, tick the box. He said it was his agent did it. And it was just a human error. Under the Migration Act, it doesn't matter. It's your personal responsibility to do so. It's not the most serious offence, but it is another factor within that, as would have been the examples I gave of the previous test, the behaviour in Serbia and Spain. All of these accumulate. And essentially what the minister was saying today is whether or not one unvaccinated man effectively in a tennis hub in Melbourne for a set period of time is going to make a huge difference to what we're facing with Omicron now. Yeah. It's not really the point. It's the principle and the deterrence against others. That's what the minister is saying today. And that will be the point that he made on good order and public health and in the public interest.
Sorry, just one last question, Jack, very quickly. Is there a world in which he can appeal, and while the appeal is pending, can he play?
Oh yeah, this is the kind of the disaster for Tennis Australia, whereby his lawyers go in at the weekend and argue, listen, we want an injunction, get him out of, or keep him out of detention, let him play Monday, because if he doesn't play Monday, it's all over. And let him keep playing pending the final decision on this. But that could take into the week, because it would then be in the interest of Djokovic's lawyers to slow it down, if you know what I mean. So it could get really, really messy. I think it's in everyone's interest, though, to get something done this weekend. But I think it's very much odds against Djokovic at this stage.
So it's a slim chance that he gets deported while holding the Australian Open trophy is what you're saying. Jack Anderson, great having you on the show as ever. Thanks a million for being with us.
Thanks to you both. All right.
Cheers.
Bye.
Professor Jack Anderson there from the University of Melbourne, and that story is quickly developing. It's fair to say just the latest update really is that there have been arrangements made for Djokovic to attend an interview with immigration officials tomorrow. So what I suspect may happen before the end of the day today in terms of this agenda moving on is family Djokovic to gather around microphones back in Serbia and give us some fire and some incredible quotes before the end of the day. But as for hearing from Djokovic, I'd be surprised if that happened. I'd say he'll be told to keep quiet himself, and that there will be more developments after that interview with immigration officials tomorrow. There's obviously a lot of different kind of ancillary storylines to this, not least I guess Australian society and law in Australia. Like the Australian Lawyers Alliance has released a statement saying the broad discretion given to the minister means that political considerations drive decisions that can seriously impact people's lives. It is astonishing that we have allowed one person to have this level of unchecked control and extraordinary power. And it does seem that way, that really it has come down to the fact that despite the fact that Federal Circuit Court Judge Anthony Kelly ruled in Djokovic's favour largely, earlier in the week, that you still have Immigration Minister Alex Hawke, who had the keys to this whole thing. And very interesting there at the start of that piece with Jack, that he said that they were waiting a few days just to take the political temperature, and I think there's probably a lot of truth in that. Delighted to say we've got OTB's resident tennis expert Colm Boohig on the line now as well. Colm, what is your reaction this morning to seeing not your beloved Novak Djokovic, your least favourite tennis player Novak Djokovic getting his visa revoked?
Eoin and Ashling, how are you? Not surprised ever since Novak Djokovic posted his latest social media post the other day. I thought he's done here because he's admitting so many errors. And I think it was just a matter of time. But then I woke up, about 6:30 Irish time this morning, and there was still no news. And that was, close of business Friday in Melbourne. And I thought they're actually just going to stay silent on this and nothing's going to happen. And then lo and behold, they made that decision, which, up until a minute beforehand, I wasn't sure if they were actually going to go through with, because as Jack just told us, the legalities behind it, and they can easily justify why they're re-departing Djokovic. I was thinking monetarily and commercially, it's such a monumental loss to the tournament that Novak Djokovic isn't going to play in this Australian Open, because he is the tournament's most successful player ever. But, talking to people in Australia, like friends and cousins over there, people are furious again. And this story has taken kind of a sandwich cycle in that when it first broke, everybody was furious for Djokovic, all around the world, like how dare he get his medical exemption when Melbourne's been cumulatively the most locked down city since COVID began in the world. And then last weekend, I felt when he was in the detention centre that there was a certain growing air of sympathy towards Djokovic, that his freedom had been taken away, so to speak, and he was in this detention centre. And then, of course, it raised the plight of refugees and asylum seekers in much worse conditions. But then I feel that the sandwich has been complete this week again, ever since it's been established that he went to that, or he did that to keep interview in Belgrade with that journalist when he knew he was COVID positive. And I think when he revealed that, I was very surprised that he didn't confirm it. I think it was all over then in terms of public sympathy and his legal right to play the tournament.
I know, and just the question that you last brought up, just if he could play, like I never even thought about that if the appeal process is going through and he could still play, like I think it's probably a long shot here by Monday to get this sorted, but wow, Owen, like, I don't know, Colin, what you think. Imagine the outrage in Australia then.
It'll be crazy. I mean, I'm just imagining Ashling like the first round match where Djokovic would, funnily enough, play a fellow Serb in Myanmar, Cekmanovic, and there's such a large cohort of Serbian people in Melbourne who would give Djokovic vociferous support. Then you'd have basically the rest of the world represented in the stadium you can just imagine the cheers. It would be overwhelming. And tennis wouldn't really be renowned for that type of raucous atmosphere really in the large, but Australian crowds they're good crack. Generally speaking, like you get a lot of value watching the Australian Open on TV, but this might tip over to a point where it's not pleasant for anybody. So at this stage, although it's a massive loss for the tournament that Djokovic isn't playing for the competitive nature of the men's side, I think it's best for all concerned that he doesn't. But it opens huge questions now about Djokovic's future at the Australian Open. 9 of his 20 Grand Slams have been won down under. And of course, if he had won this Australian Open, then he would be officially the greatest men's player of all time on paper. So it's really fascinating. And this, upcoming Drive to Survive inspired documentary on tennis is going to be even more interesting. Now, what a racket, lads.
Do you know what I think is? You
nearly missed that, Owen.
I almost did. Do you know what I think is going to happen here, Colm? And Novak Djokovic's dad is a hard man to predict. We were kind of saying earlier on, where can he go after comparing his son to Spartacus Water and Jesus? Was Jesus or God? One or the other. He probably thinks he's God and Jesus. But what I think will happen now is that he could potentially come out in a press conference today and compare his son to Muhammad Ali and say, the peak years of Muhammad Ali were taken away by the pesky government of the United States, and that just added to the whole tale of Muhammad Ali and the lore that is what we will now say about Novak Djokovic as Novak Djokovic family and Novak Djokovic ultras, that actually you've taken away potentially 3 Australian Open titles for him. And you know what? It doesn't matter. He's still going to go down as the greatest. He's still going to eclipse 20 Grand Slam titles, and we did it in spite of you. That in a way, this will actually just, for people who want the legend to go that way, it will increase the legend around Novak Djokovic. His fans will be utilising this in some sort of strange siege mentality way.
Yeah, this is Djokovic's own personal Vietnam War. This is his Ali moment. It will totally strengthen the resolve of his fans. Because one thing I was thinking about was that the Immigration Minister Alex Hawke was delaying the decision, and I was wondering, it is plausible that they were waiting for Djokovic to voluntarily walk away, so then he would save himself a 3-year ban. But that was never in Djokovic's nature. That's exactly what he won't do. And so, fans were like, he stayed true to his own principles, and he didn't give in here, and he's not playing this tournament, but he's better off for it. And then he still has 3 more Grand Slams to go this year, so you still wouldn't back against him finishing 2022, leading the Grand Slam title race against Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal. So for Djokovic's camp, this kind of changes nothing. For everybody else, his legacy is again questioned.
Talk us through what this actually does then on the tennis side of things. I think we're probably going to talk here under the assumption that he's not going to appear.
Yeah.
I think looking through your notes here, you're extremely excited about what Nick Kyrgios and Daniel Medvedev could do if they come up against one another. There are a lot of exclamation marks on this document in front of me.
Yeah, I was like, Joe was asking me, Juicer Joe, do you have any notes here? And I was like, well, I do, but they're not succinct. So I'll forward them on to you. And it was in block capitals. Nick Kyrgios could play Daniel Medvedev in the second round. So Kyrgios has COVID, so he's recovering. He's hoping to recover in time to play. So we hope he does play. At the time of talking, he is playing. And he's due to play qualifier in the first round. And Medvedev should win his first round. So then that'd be a blockbuster second round. Medvedev reached the final of the Australian Open last year, lost to Djokovic fairly comfortably, but then beat Djokovic at the most recent Grand Slam at the US Open to deny Djokovic his all-time record. So now that Djokovic, as you say, it looks like he's not playing in time speaking, Medvedev is by far, I would say, the favourite to win the tournament. So I'd say Kyrgios' journey will probably stop at the second round if he does play. But it would still be a great match because the atmosphere will be class. Other than that, though, Rafael Nadal won the Melbourne Somerset. It's his first tournament that he's won in Australia since 2009. Now, it's his least successful Grand Slam out of all 4 for Nadal. He's only won the Australian Open once, way back in 2009. But of course, he's level at Djokovic with 20. So out of the big 3, he's the only one playing now because Federer is injured. So Nadal, now this makes it a lot easier that Djokovic doesn't play because Nadal was due to play Djokovic in the semi-final if he had beaten Alexander Zverev in the quarter-final, which I think would be a close match. So I would say if I was to make a prediction right now, the men's Australian Open final this year will be Rafael Nadal against Daniel Medvedev.
And whoever comes out on top, let's say that Djokovic doesn't play, and whoever comes out on top, is it tainted a small bit that maybe the best player isn't playing?
It's a good question, Ashling, because yes, to put it simply, but then say if Nadal wins, then it's just, his 21st Grand Slam title. And he's due it, it's justified. Then he can go on and add to that at the French Open. If Medvedev was to win the Australian Open, and I do feel he's favourite, then yeah, I do think that people will say, well, it's because your biggest rival wasn't there. But Medvedev's not going to care at the end. No one who wins this is going to care at the end of their career.
No.
They still won the Australian Open. But yeah, everybody will be talking about it. And I suppose, look, the shame about this for all the other men in the competition on that side of the draw anyway is that, the commentary is going to be about Djokovic throughout, whether he plays or not. And look, I do whatever you think about this whole situation. It's a mess already from everyone, from the Victoria stage to the federal government, Tennis Australia, Novak Djokovic. Nobody comes out this well. But I'm sad that Djokovic isn't playing because I think it makes the competition less on the ATP side. I would love to be playing.
On the ATP side, it will have an asterisk beside it, which, Colm, I'm sure you'll agree, is just like Cork's All-Ireland win in 2010, and that asterisk that it has beside it as a result of not beating Kerry en route to winning that All-Ireland. The handiest All-Ireland. It'll be the handiest win ever for whoever does do it. Just before we let you go, Colm, because we are out of time, anything else that you're buzzing for next week?
Yeah, well, the first round of the women's side, Emma Raducanu against Sloane Stephens, battle of the US Open champions. Raducanu, of course, is the defending champion of the US Open, won that whole tournament without dropping a set. And Sloane Stephens is a former champion, so that would be a brilliant first round match. So someone big is going out early. And then probably the most exciting element of the women's side of the draw is in the fourth round. The potential clash is Naomi Osaka, who's back, the defending Australian Open champion, one of two of the last 3 years, is up against world number one and home favourite Ash Barty. That could happen in the fourth round, so that would be unbelievable. Barty's the defending Wimbledon champion, looking to become the first Australian to win the Australian Open in 44 years. That would probably be the match of the tournament on paper. Fourth round, Osaka against Barty, all going well.
Good stuff. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say also this is the first Grand Slam since 1997 not to contain either of the Williams sisters, Serena or Venus, not playing.
Right, okay. We will be checking in with you all next week, Colin. Enjoy your last weekend of tennis-free action this weekend, and you will not
you
get
won't
a
be. I'll be in Mexico. You won't be.
You'll be what?
I'll be in Mexico.
You'll be in Mexico?
I will, yeah.
Oh, sorry. All right. Okay.
Oh,
well, enjoy Mexico. Is that the honeymoon?
Yeah, well, it's part of it. Yeah.
All right.
Well, it is. Yeah.
Part of it's amazing.
I'll still talk to you. I'll happily talk to you, but I'll be in Mexico. I'll be 16 hours behind the Australian Open action. I was googling.
Nice one, or 8 hours in front if you want to put it that way. Colin, enjoy the honeymoon. Hope you've got a great one. We'll chat to you later.
Go on, lads. Take it easy.